This conference will now be recorded.
It's 9 o'clock.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order, July the 15th, the year 2020. It's 9 a.m. This meeting will be conducted entirely by teleconferencing in accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N 2920, and the boardroom will not be accessible to the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to directly address the agency board of directors concerning any item on the agenda during the consideration of that item. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dan Wilkins, will you lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of
the United States of America, to the republic, which
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment. Anyone?
We have a public comment.
Yes, I would like to make a public comment.
Okay. Can you state your name, please, sir?
Yes, my name is Greg Schleusner. I am a local resident for over 40 years and also a TTSA employee for 30-something years in the laboratory, including 14 years at the end as the laboratory supervisor. A couple of days ago, I wrote a column in Moonshine Inc. regarding recently resigned lab director Laura Mader. I believe my background is some of her comments. I would agree that having non-laboratory certified employees perform required waste discharge laboratory monitoring is inappropriate. Having non-lab certified, minimally trained, inadequately supervised staff perform lab work, certifying that waste discharge requirements are met may prove to be reckless and foolish decision. I believe regulatory oversight in the future will be wary of all future data and reports. And as a former lab supervisor at TTSA, I agree with Laura Mader that I would not be in a position to certify lab work performed by non-laboratory certified employees that were the certified waste discharge monitoring. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under public comment? Anyone?
I have a letter that was submitted for public comment from the Ponderosa Martis Neighbors United, and they asked that the letter be read for public comment. To the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency, we of Ponderosa Martis Neighbors United, an organization for those who live on Reynolds Way, Martis Drive, and Estates Drive, are threatened by potential negative impacts of the proposed Jorger Ranch Parcel 4 development near us. If this piece of Jorger Ranch property, bordered by Brockway Road, Highway 267, and the Ponderosa Golf Course, is divided into 7 lots and developed, our neighborhood will be disrupted by the efforts of noise, night lighting, visual blight, traffic, and most importantly, loss of safety. We have been speaking against this development since 2012 and nothing has changed. Our belief that it will also destroy the character of our community. If Parcel 4 is developed, Hundreds of vehicles will exit north on Martis Drive into our neighborhood daily, seeking an alternative route to Brockway Road. Currently, our narrow, unlined streets welcome cyclists and families walking children and dogs. They provide access to the Legacy Trail and are used by golfers crossing the third fairway and walking near the clubhouse. They pass senior citizens housing as well as the busy skateboard park off Estates Drive. If this development is allowed, there will be accidents and some fatal ones, endangering many. Besides the dark cloud it would cast over our neighborhood, the development on parcel 4 would remove a safe choice for pilots flying out of Truckee Tahoe Airport. Currently, the Ponderosa Golf Course is a designated emergency landing option when departing westbound from the airport's most used runway 29. Buildings in parcel 4 would make an approach for a safe landing on the golf course unlikely, as well as jeopardize people's lives. An airplane crashed in parcel 4 in 2012. The pilot and his passenger walked away unhurt because there were no buildings there. Truckee Tahoe Airport's purchase of the Ponderosa Golf Course in 2008 to retain open space near the airport was a great gift to us and the Truckee community of an affordable recreation opportunity operated by the Truckee Donner Recreation and Park District. The town of Truckee could do the same by designating parcel 4 as a necessary open space and safe public path through the park for walkers and cyclists to reach the Legacy Trail. For those of us who have lived in Truckee for decades, we know that money and growth can benefit a town's economic health and vitality. Yet no matter what the goals are on the paper, people are the soul of this community, and Truckee's special quality is serenity. Our 50-year-old neighborhood expresses that. Please hear our urgent plea and deny the proposal for development on the Jorger Ranch parcel 4 property. Thank you for your time and consideration. Ponderosa Martis Neighbors United.
Okay, if it's all right with the rest of the directors, I would like this letter to the board and to the agency to be entered into the record and will stand as read. Any objections? Seeing none and hearing none. Rochelle? So entered. Anything else under public comment? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Moving on. Professional Achievement Awards and Anniversaries.
Good morning, President Cox and directors. Vicki Lufrano, Human Resources Administrator. And I would just like to acknowledge some staff for their Safety Suggestion Awards for the second quarter of 2020. And that would be Ryan Schultz with his suggestion of remove the ladder cage that blocks the filtrate tank ladder. Anthony Salinas with his suggestion of several suggestions of install hand-free sanitary door openers on select doors, install proper racking for valve storage in containers by AWT, install a locking pin on the new drum attachment for the forklift to prevent it from spilling contents, replace the controller cord for the hoist in building 7 with the one that allows reaching the controller without using a ladder, close off gaps in the guardrails on secondary clarifiers 1 and 2 with vertical posts, install toe boards on the areas that are missing for the platform on stripper basin 57 and 58, and install a guard around the exposed pipe that goes to the ERB and audit facility for similar issues. And we also have Chewy Zarate with his 3 suggestions of install locking mechanism for the grit chamber hatch closest to the corridor, install a new equipment sink in maintenance shop to provide separate washing for hands and parts for sanitary purposes, and install machine guarding on pump 4662 and 4664 downstairs in building 4. And last, Billy Martin with his suggestion of lower the heads of the valve extensions for the grit pumps to eliminate trip hazards. So I just want to thank these employees for making their suggestions and for receiving the 2 hours of admin leave for each suggestion that was accepted.
Okay, anything else there, Vicki?
Not at this time. We will talk.
Okay, I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the 4 employees for participating in Safety First. It means a lot to the organization. Moving along, the consent agenda.
I'll move for approval of the consent agenda.
Before we move forward to approve, I have an amendment for the minutes to item number 13. Item number 13, there's an amendment instead of just below the motion, it says the board denied. It should say the board approved. So I'd like to, if we could, to approve it with that amendment of the board approve the motion for item number.
Okay.
So moved.
And that's for the minutes.
That's for the minutes.
That's for the minutes. Mine's the consent calendar.
That's on the consent calendar, yes.
Okay. Any other input on the financial consent agenda? Anyone? Will ask for a motion to approve with the amendment as stated.
Move approval.
By Wilkins.
I'll second.
That Blake? Seconded by Blake. Call please.
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
and Blake Tresson.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, moving along to the regular agenda. Report from the June 17th, 2020 closed session meeting.
Good morning. At the June 17, 2020 Board of Directors meeting, after closed session, the Board of Directors did not come out and provide a report of closed session. So I'd like to do so. So the report from the June 17, 2020 closed session meeting, there is nothing to report.
Okay, any comments on this agenda item? Seeing none and hearing none. Item 2, public hearing for public comment related to the board's consideration of adopting resolution of the board adopting 2020-2021 tax roll billing report.
We need to approve, do the roll call for item number 1. Or if there's nothing to
There's
report.
nothing to report.
My apologies.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
Well, there was nothing to report. My apologies.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about the public hearing for public comment report related to the board's consideration of adopting resolution 2020-2021 tax roll billing report and approving billing and collection of the charges on the county tax rolls.
I'll make that motion for approval of billing and collection on the tax rolls.
Okay, need a
Second.
second. It's been moved by Lewis.
Time out,
Wilkins.
time out.
Yes?
Yeah, this is Dick. We gotta slow down here. Item number 2 is the public hearing regarding the proposal to collect the 2020-21 charges on the tax roll. So the first thing you should do is open the public hearing, see if there's any comments or objections from the public, and close the public hearing, and then move on to consider items 3 through 5. as long as I've got the floor now, after the public hearing, if the board wishes, it may approve agenda items 3, 4, and 5 together in one motion. They all relate to the same subject matter, one resolution for each county. But again, first you should open the public hearing and see if there's any comments.
Okay, the public hearing is now open. Are there any comments in regards to collection tax rolls? Any questions or comments? Billing report and approving the billing collection of the charges of the Placer County tax roll.
I will make the motion to, for approvals of resolution number 6, 2020, item 4, resolution 7, 2020, and item 5, 8, 2020. Motion for approval.
On the floor from Director Lewis. Need a second?
Second.
Been moved by Blake as a second.
It was Director Northrup.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup. John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
Dale Cox, I'm sorry, and Director Cox, President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved for items 3 through 5.
Okay, next item is item 6, public hearing for public comment related to the board's consideration of adopting a collection, a resolution of the board to adopt a report on the delinquent charges and authorizing their collection on the tax roll. Item 6. Any questions, comments?
Move approval.
Public comment.
Dale,
Public comment.
Dale, this is Shanahan. Again, with respect to the motion, if the board wishes, agenda items 7, 8, 9, and 10 all relate to the same subject matter of collecting delinquencies on the county tax roll. If the board wishes, it may approve those 4 items in one motion. Before doing so, though, you should close the public hearing under item 6.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing on item number 6. Public for the public comment related to the board's consideration of adopting a resolution for the board to adopt a report on delinquent charges and authorizing their collection on the tax roll.
I will now make the motion for approval of items 7, 8, and 9, numbers 9, 2020, resolution 9, 2020, resolution 10, 2020, and resolution 11, 2020. That is my motion.
I'll second.
And we also need to include item number 10, to include the certifications for collection of the delinquent charges of the El Dorado County tax roll.
So move with item 10.
Thank you.
And need a second there, Northrup.
Second.
You got it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Director Lewis, a second by Director Northrup. Call, please.
Yeah.
Did you call my name, Rochelle?
I did. For roll call, you're kind of frozen for a second.
Yes.
Okay. John Northrup? John Northrup, roll call. Sean, can I get your vote for roll call, please? Sean?
It's 3 times.
Okay, didn't hear you there, sorry.
That's
Lane?
okay.
Yes.
Static on some line here.
Okay. Blake Tresson?
Yes, I think the static is coming, Lane. I hate to say it from your device. If you could just really only turn off the mute when you're saying something. I know you've been putting it on at the beginning of the roll call, and it's obstructing all the other communications. Sorry about that.
I'll see if I can handle the muting on this side to eliminate that for everybody. And final, President Cox?
Yes.
Okay, motion approved for approval of items 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, moving along to item 11. Approval of agency's core values.
Good morning again, President Cox and Directors, Vicki Lufrano, Human Resources Administrator. Early in 2020, the leadership team comprised of all supervisors, managers, and the HR administrator embarked on the creation of agency core values. Through several meetings working together, the leadership team created 5 core values to reflect the work culture TTSA is working toward. Drafts of the core values were shared with all staff for feedback, and then the feedback was incorporated. After finalizing the core values, the leadership team defined appropriate and expected behaviors to correspond to each core value. These were also provided to all staff for feedback. And I'd like to share the 5 core values that the leadership team came up with. Those are service. We take pride in our responsibility to the community, to the water, and to the future. We extend our responsibility and dedication for service to all we encounter in our community, including each other, the board of directors, ratepayers, member districts, contractors, taxpayers, and visitors. Professionalism. We are a team of respectful professionals. Regardless of position, we provide leadership and take pride in doing what is right. As environmental and financial stewards, we are dedicated to serving in the safest, most positive, and efficient manner with the highest level of integrity. Teamwork. We support each other, the board of directors, and our entire community, promoting collaboration and cooperation to fulfill our vision. We believe that through respectful and inclusive teamwork, we achieve more. We value people who do what is best for the team and their own happiness. Initiative. We continue to evolve to meet the community's future. We take personal responsibility for continuous improvement, learning, and growth, which are critical to our environment, our individual success, and the success of the agency. We support growth, development, succession planning, and job satisfaction. We acknowledge challenges will occur, but progress is impossible without change. And the last one, communication. We use kind and transparent communication to build positive and effective relationships with each other, the board of directors, and our entire community. Open, honest, and respectful communication is fundamental to the success of the agency, the team, and each of us as individuals. The core values, in addition to functional competencies, will be incorporated into the annual performance evaluation for each job classification. If these core values are approved, the evaluation will be updated and shared with the board of directors at a future meeting. Because there was so much effort that went into these core values, I'd just like to thank some of the people that were involved, because it was a pretty detailed process. And that includes TTSA staff, the leadership team, a couple of people from other agencies, which were Sean and Michelle from TCPUD and Liz over at TSD. Everybody had a little part in it, and LaRue for his continued and constant support of the core values. There is an amended recommendation, which would be management and staff recommend approval of the agency core values to include the behaviors.
Thank you, Vicki. Any comments from the staff and correction, the board? Any comments? Any further comments from any of the staff?
I would just add a comment that I think it's a healthy exercise that TTSA did this. I suspect it may be the first time ever that TTSA has gone through this kind of a process with its employees, and I think it's good management practice to be doing this periodically. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to double down on what Dan says. I mean, this is a great move forward. You know, all employees being involved, getting being involved in the teamwork here is critical. The transparency that this puts forward for our employees is an excellent move forward. So I want to thank staff and everybody that was involved here.
Any other comments?
This is Blake. Yeah, I concur with Dan and Lane on that. Vicki, could you just elaborate perhaps a little more once the board, assuming the board approves of these core values, exactly what the next step is? How do these core values actually get utilized by the agency, and what format and function?
Yes, thanks, Blake, for the question. So the core values, along with the associated behaviors, basically tell employees what's expected of them and how they should behave, and really gives them a roadmap to be able to achieve that. So the next steps are that we're going to, we have TrackStar as a new performance evaluation software. And within TrackStar, we're going to incorporate these core values along with the associated behaviors. There will be additional meetings with the leadership team as well as employees to come up with the background information for the evaluations. And when I say the background information, kind of the backside of the evaluation, where the core values and the behaviors are incorporated into the evaluating system. And I know over at TCPUD, and one of the reasons that I think Sean and Michelle is that they shared a lot of their information. They went through this process and they have TrackStar and shared the backside information also. But they've included the evaluating system to include 50% of the evaluation incorporates these core values and the behaviors. While TTSA doesn't know exactly what numbers we'll have, because we haven't gone through that process with the leadership team and the staff, we would expect to have maybe a similar number where 50% of the employee's annual evaluation would be based on following these core values and the associated behaviors.
Thanks, Vicki.
You're welcome.
Any other contributions from the board or staff?
I would like to move approval of the core values.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve and a second. No further questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Along to approval of the agency fund policy.
I so move.
Any discussion? It's been moved by Northrup to approve the fund policy. Need a second?
Is there a staff report?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did have a little presentation or discussion, if you would like to hear a little bit of that. So we talked a little bit about the fund policy with the budgets, the month previous with the budgets. So we go a little bit more in depth this month with the fund policy, talking about the funds and the general fund and how it all works together. So with the fund policy, we talk about you will see that Fund 0 and 01 are not included, as we are proposing to extinguish them in the next item on the report, or further along in the packets this month. But the fund policy will confirm and establish, as I've written here, financial operating reserve funds. And the agency keeps and manages 2 operating funds and 4 reserve funds for the current and future needs and plans to accomplish prudent long-term financial planning. So the purpose is to set forth various funds to describe each fund's purpose and how they will be used with their target fund balances and what the processes are for them. So the general fund that we talked about is now the fund that is going to encompass all of our administrative and operational purposes of monies. So it encompasses Fund 0 and 1 that we operated out of before. So instead of having 2 funds, we have 1 general fund to operate from with all of our monies. And now the general fund is a combination. And so I think Blake had asked for this before we even did the budgets, to have a better understanding of how it all works. And instead of just reading through the policy, it's easier to look at the table and understand how it all works. So at the very back of the policy is the table. And you can see that 00 are being extinguished, and it's now part of Fund 10, which is the general fund. So the general fund is the new fund that we're operating from. And we budget using 15% of our property tax revenue, and 35% or 15% of our property tax revenue and sewer service charge revenue, and 35% of budgeted expenditures. So we have monies from different sources of revenue into the general fund so that we can pay for all of the expenditures necessary. And Fund 2 is the wastewater capital reserve fund. And that fund hasn't changed. That fund still receives revenue from connection charges. The SRF fund, last month we extinguished that fund, so it's no longer in existence. Fund 6 is the replacement and rehab and upgrade fund. 7 is the emergency reserve fund, which we put into place, I believe, a year ago. I think it was a year or 2 ago. So that had a $4 million balance that we started the fund off with, or $4 million, and it's only earning interest. So there's no other additional revenues being put into that. It's just the emergency fund that is earning interest. The rate stabilization fund is a new fund. So the revenue source for this fund is provided through the collection of sewer service charges. So if you go through the policy, I'm sure you've all had a chance to read this, but the rate stabilization fund is a fund that we created to be able to order here, to be able to insulate the ratepayers from a large abrupt increase in sewer service charges. So it's basically a buffer for us to be able to pull from should our rates increase, so we wouldn't have to increase charges or increase sewer service charges. We could pull from those funds instead of having to reach out to our ratepayers for those monies. So it's just an additional reserve account or an additional fund account to use from. And then the unrestricted reserve is another reserve account that we created that's also new. The three new accounts that we created are the rate stabilization, the unrestricted reserve, and the general fund. 8, 9, and 10, those three are new. And the unrestricted reserve at the end of the year, at the end of each fiscal year, any monies in the other funds in excess of the fund's target balance shall be transferred to the unrestricted reserve fund. So as you can see on the table, it shows you what the target balances are. So at the end of the year, if the fund has reached its target balance, any excess above that target balance for the fund is transferred to the unrestricted reserve fund. And general fund we've already discussed. I know Blake has already reached out to me, and I've actually answered some questions he had already. Does anyone else have any other questions that aren't answered by the policy or the table that they would like to discuss?
I wouldn't mind hearing Blake's thoughts on it. Then I've got a couple of comments potentially, depending on whether or not Blake covers what's on my mind.
Sure.
Thanks, Dan and LaRue and Rochelle. Really nice job. It's great to have much clearer definitions of the various funds the district uses, and establishing these minimum targets is really helpful for long range planning. So I applaud the efforts of staff on this. My main questions had to do with, the basis for the minimum targets being set, and just trying to get clarification. Also, a question on the table under fund number 10. It appears that the target, based on 15% of the annual budgeted property tax and sewer service charge revenue and 35% of budgeted expenditures, would set a $8.8 million target balance, but it shows that we're starting the year at 3. And so I was curious, and then the new fund 9 says you only transfer funds in excess of the target balance into that, but there's 2.7 million that's been put into it, yet we appear to be $5.8 million short in fund 10. And an additional question is that I'm not sure what the description there in the white column of the table says. At the end of each fiscal year, surplus money is in excess of 300,000. So where does the 300,000 come in relation to those percentages in terms of establishing a target balance? Is the 300,000, I'm just trying to connect the dots between all those.
I can answer that one for you. In the white column under the description and funding, that 300,000, that was my fault for not catching the current before we set the new target balance, combining the totals between Fund 0 and 01. Previously, Fund 0 and 01 together had a $50,000 and a $250,000 target balance. So together combined, it would have been 300, but so it would have had a $300,000 target balance. However, when doing the target balance for the general fund moving forward, I took the budget for this year and included the UAL. And when you draw that out over the year, and for the first 6 months of the year, it's definitely more than $300,000 worth of expenditures. So I was trying to cover the first 6 months of expenditures because it'll be 6 months before we receive our first our first tax roll payment. And prior to us going to the tax roll, we didn't have that problem because we were receiving income on a regular basis. So now that we have this change of billing, we need to change the way we receive monies. Does that make sense? So I just didn't change this description in here, but that was the basis of the frame of mind of why we're changing and where this number comes from.
So the description in the white column there under Fund 10 is kind of a historical statement. Correct. But not the current statement is the far right, the target balance.
Exactly.
And then maybe LaRue or Rochelle, you could explain if the target balance is 8.8 million.
Yes.
You know, what point in the year is that supposed to be the balance, and how do we reconcile $3 million as shown as our beginning balance versus a target of 8.8?
So if you looked at the financial statements currently that are in the board packet, it's closer to $3 million in actual existing funds in the account. So that's because our target balance is 8.8 million because that's what we need for the actual first 6 months of expenditures in the year. What we currently have in the account is 3 million. I think it's like 3.6 actually.
So would we be needing to pull from the new Fund 9 to meet our operating budget during this first 6 months?
Yes. Normally we would pull from Fund 6, but with the new fund policy, we will most likely pull from the unrestricted fund to cover the expenses that we need. Because now the intent is in the future, we're going to have everything we need in Fund 10 to pay for all of our expenses, including the UAL. So automatically, I mean, July 9th, I paid that 1.5 million or 1,315,000 UAL. And that's more than we have in our account. So we had to pull those monies out. So normally we would pull that from Fund 6, but it would come from Fund 9. And in the future, we'll have all the funds we need in Fund 10 because it'll be structured that way. But currently it's not. So setting it up for the future to be exactly what we need. And we're just in the middle of that transition. So it's not appearing the way we want it to. But next year, it's the intent that it's all going to flow and look exactly the way we need it to. But
okay, so
it's showing what you need. What's actually
some of this is just an artifact of the fact that we set the budget last month and we set the beginning balance at 3 million, and now we're adopting the target balance and it's off by a little bit. But next year you will have had the target balance established before the budget gets done and it'll come into alignment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. No further questions at this time.
Okay, any other questions from any of the board members in regards to, go ahead there, Dan.
Thank you, Dale. So I just want to make sure I'm thinking of this clearly. So TTSA has two basic categories of money in my mind. I always try to simplify things. So we've got our general fund, which is rate revenue and property tax combined. And we have a high degree of flexibility to use that money on really anything related to agency business. And then we've got funds that are derived from connection fees that are very restricted to be used only for certain types of capital projects. So basically, all of our rate revenue and our property tax revenue comes in and it goes to the general fund. And then our connection fees come in and they go into the connection fee fund, basically. That's probably not the right term for it. What's that?
Yeah. Fund
Right.
2 is the wastewater capital.
Right. So then the money for connection fees, it basically just sits in that fund. And then when capital projects are budgeted over time, they would generally draw capital projects that are eligible for connection fee use. They would draw that fund down to various levels. So one question in my mind is, for that fund, do we want to set a minimum fund balance target so that when we're budgeting, let's say, for instance, we decide to budget some major capital investments over the next 5 years. And let's say we've got $20 million in that fund right now. Do we want to, from a budget standpoint, as a board, set a policy that, okay, even though we've got 20 million there, our target is to never get below 2 million in that account, or 1 million, whatever the right number is. With the notion being that with the capital projects that we budget, let's say we've got 20 million and we say, okay, we're going to set a minimum balance of 2. So that's going to give us a guideline that we're not going to budget more than $18 million worth of expenditures out of that account, because we never want the balance to go below 2 million. And then here's the kicker, unless we have capital projects that we budgeted, expecting they cost 18 million. And then as we get into construction, it turns out they cost more. So then, the purpose of setting a minimum target balance in that account is really budgetary guidance, but recognizing that we might still use that money in that account. So if we're in midstream in a construction project, or we get construction bids that are higher than expected, it gives us a contingency fund effectively in our overall budget framework, so that these capital projects, if they come in more expensive than expected, they can still go forward, as opposed to, for instance, budgeting all $20 million worth of that money, having it all programmed, and then getting into a construction cycle, being short on money, and then not having a contingency account, for lack of a better term, to go to. So that's, I guess, a question I wanted to throw out to the staff and the board as it relates to our reserve policies. I think we've got this replacement, rehabilitation, and upgrade fund, which replacement would not be eligible for connection fees. I think only expansion is. So I throw that question out using that fund as an example, but I think you could transfer that logic over to a couple of the other funds as well. And I'd be curious to hear LaRue's thoughts on whether that makes sense or not.
Thank you, Dan. It does make sense. To be clear, you're not referring to a target balance, you're referring to a reserve left in the balance. We do the process, we have the annual approval process of a 5-year CIP plan. We also bring each capital project to the board for approval and for payments. So we do track it, but based on the scenario that you listed up there, to ensure that we don't exceed the funds through through unexpected expenditures during projects, it would be beneficial for us to go ahead and put a minimum on there. So that makes sense to me.
Okay, and I think of it as a target minimum for budget purposes,
Correct.
Recognizing that the reason it's there is so that if we get into a significant capital expenditure cycle at some point, that we reduce the likelihood that those capital projects get delayed or need to be reprioritized because of a lack of funding due to unexpected cost increases. So, yeah.
Does the board feel comfortable with a monetary amount or a percentage?
LaRue, from my experience with TSD, we look at our forecast of expenditures, the 5-year improvement projects, and then we just set a target balance of 30% of the next 5 years or 60% of the next 5 years. So it's kind of a weighted average of making sure we've got, enough to cover. It's a little bit obscure, but it's 60% of the next 5 years projected capital expenditures.
Okay.
I think the way, Blake, what you said, I think the weighted average is percentage is the way to go.
Yeah, I think the other reason to have that kind of a budgeting approach is that sometimes a capital project need will present itself unexpectedly mid-budget cycle, and having a reserve account that you can go to, that it's not a reserve saying we're never going to spend it. It's a reserve that keeps things going if costs come in higher than expected, or that is an easy place to go to if an opportunity comes up mid-budget cycle that doesn't disrupt the rest of our project activity. I think would be the other reason to do it. I don't have a strong opinion as to whether it's a fixed monetary amount or some kind of an average amount. If the amount is being kind of set based on those two ideas in mind, right? Of having some money in the kitty so that if there's an opportunity that comes up, we can jump on it quickly, or having money in the kitty to keep things going when things cost more than we had hoped. So I don't have a strong opinion as to what the right way to set that minimum amount is.
I think that's a good idea to add into it. We have a couple options. One is to agree to a percentage similar to Blake's TSD, 60% over the next 5 years, and have an approval of the policy contingent to that, or return next month with an updated policy for review after staff has the ability to go back, review the numbers, look at the budgets to make sure that these percentages are reasonable. I would prefer that we go back and take a look at the numbers, percentages, and return next month with the fund policy approval. There's no harm in the delay, in my opinion. But likewise, we just simply sign a percentage and move forward today as well.
So I actually have the budgets in front of me from last month. So for the 5-year wastewater capital reserve fund, the 5-year total was 26.2 million. It's actually 26,246,892. 60% of that is 15.7 million. And we have 18.8 million in the account. So 15.7 million is.
And just, that would be a method of determining a minimum target balance. It's, there's no harm having additional funds. That just assures that you've got, based on your plan, enough to, meet your capital needs for expansion projects over the next 5 years. But if you have more, it's just a minimum target. you fall below that, you're potentially looking at, financial shortfalls and needing to pull on reserves even to hit your planned budget. So, based on the numbers Rochelle gave, that indicates that you have healthy reserves if you use that as your target. Again, it's not a set target that you would then transfer funds out of that fund into some other place. And I don't think you can do that with the connection fees anyhow. But it just sets a minimum account balance. And if you start to see yourself falling below that, you better start looking at, our connection fee model and whether that's providing adequate funds for those needs. I liked your plan, LaRue, of revisiting this. I don't see anything critical path in terms of the board adopting this at this time, and would recommend that we table this to a future board meeting upon staff's further investigation.
Sure, we can do that and come up with different percentages to look at and see how it compares to the overall reserves and what the board is comfortable with.
Okay, any further questions or comments from any of the board members in regards to our agency fund policy? It appears we're going to table this item on the agenda and we're going to address it at a future board meeting. Does anyone have any problem with that? Okay.
Looks to me, if we can adjust it in the future and keep it fine-tuned, that would probably be the good way.
Okay. Any further comments? We're going to move on. Item number 13, approval of resolution number 12-2020, extinguishing administrative and operation maintenance funds and transferring money to the general fund.
Now, although we are not approving the fund policy, this resolution is important to complete so that we can move forward with operations according to the budget for the general fund and to move forward with our operations. So staff recommends to move forward with approval of resolution 12-2020.
Also move.
I'll second it. I'll second.
Any comments from the board? Need a motion?
I have a motion from Tresson and a second from Lewis.
Okay, no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
On to item 14, discussion on UAL restricting strategies.
So also again, another item we've discussed previously is the UAL, and Director Tresson also asked us to return with a discussion of the SEP policy. This is something that he is also familiar with. And months ago, I had mentioned this. SEP is a new trust that CalPERS has opened. So SEP is short for California Employers Pension Pre-Funding Trust. So the SEP program is similar to CERT. So CERT program is something that we participate in. The agency participates in the CERT program for our healthcare premiums for retirees. So you're probably familiar with this. Many years ago, Marcia pre-funded the CERT trust with a $4 million investment. So just like our UAL is for our pension, we pay for retirees' health care once they're retired. So that's also something that we have to fund. So instead of paying down our health care, we created this trust. And we make payments to the trust, or made payments to the trust instead of paying it directly. And it accrued interest over time, which increased the amount of money that we had to pay for those expenses. So the SEP policy works in the same way. Instead of paying directly to our UAL, we can put the money into this trust where it earns interest. And instead of paying it directly to CalPERS, we put it into the trust, and it earns the interest, and CalPERS is aware of the money that we have, so they see that money that is in there, and instead of being charged the percentage, the 7%, before I'm going to lose myself, I'm getting excited here, but instead of being charged the 7% interest on what we owe, we're earning 7%, and OPEB we're earning 7%, but in SEP you earn 4 to 5% interest that's in there. And your UAL goes down. So in the CERT, for our healthcare, we're 93% funded for our healthcare, which is pretty good. We're, I think, in Matt, so Matt Goss is on the line with us. Matt, if you want to wave at everybody. So he is the CalPERS professional. He takes care of CERT and SEPT. And so we are in, I want to say, the 90th percentile of, I think, 42 agencies that's as high funded. At one time, I think we were like 98% funded, but we've had more retirees in the last few years. And then also the market has been up and down, and rates change over time. So we're currently 93% funded in our CERT. So SEPT works just the same way. Instead of paying over the next 5 years, we've discussed paying down with this fresh start amortization schedule without the contract. So we're paying this money down straight to CalPERS. Well, every year our UAL drops, it's going to continue to change. We're going to have new employees. We're going to have retirees. So even though the number's changing, it's going to continue to increase as we pay it down. And we're not earning interest on that money we pay down. It's going to forever change if we're not getting anything for it. But if we put money into the trust, we could be earning interest all the while it goes towards the UAL, or counting towards our UAL, without actually paying it off. Hopefully I'm making sense to you without actually talking about in policy terms. So that is kind of the gist of the SEP program. And so the other option that I briefly mentioned in here is a pension obligation bond. So similar to the revenue refunding bond that we just did, you could also purchase revenue refunding bonds that, whether it's all of the amount or just a percentage of the amount that we owe on our UAL, we purchase these bonds and they pay that debt for us, either all or a portion of it. However, we have that debt. Now we have a debt, where with SEPT, we wouldn't have a debt. We just pay as we go when we have the funds available. And with the bonds, we have a debt. But at the same time, we get it at a lower interest rate, where with CalPERS paying directly And having that UAL, it's at 7%. With the revenue refunding bond, it's at a lower interest rate over time. And we can save that interest rate. So there's different ways to look at it. Either way, you can save money, debt or no debt. It just depends how you look at it and what the board prefers to do. Hopefully I made sense of that in layman's kind of terms. We do have the presentations that I put in the packet that kind of explain that. And if the board has any questions, I have representatives from both sides available on the line that can answer some questions for you.
Okay, any questions right now for any of the consultants that we have online?
If clarify real briefly, this is not an action item. This is nothing more for discussion. And again, this is on the heels, like Phil said, of a directive provided at last month's board meeting. So initially, the idea was to come back.
Hold on a second. There's a lot of feedback on the line right now. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but let me mute some
It might be
lines.
Wilkins.
Is that better?
Yes. Yes.
So
Kind of sounds
I don't know
like-
what you caught, so I'll go over it again real briefly. This is an action item. This is primarily just for discussion based on last month's directive to come back with some more information on SEPT in regards to the additional UAL payment. So while we're setting that up, we were also contacted to consider looking into a pension bond scenario that the agency could take advantage of. So the idea today was to go ahead and just have minor discussions on it. We asked that the presentations didn't go into in-depth simply because we weren't quite there. So I was hoping to have today's conversation touch base on some questions, some preliminary questions you may have for these options. Based on the interest, return back with more detailed numbers and alternatives at the next board meeting. Again, so a little reminder. And I'll hand it back to you, Rochelle. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the board of directors? I see Dan with his hand up.
Yeah, so I'm trying to make sure I understand this properly. So as it relates to unfunded accrued liability with CalPERS, we as an agency have a couple of basic options, maybe three. One is to just pay it as we go, with CalPERS, submitting us our required amount from 1 year to the next. And then that's going to be influenced by how well the CalPERS investment fund does. If it does better some years, then we may need lower payments than if they have a bad year. So that's one option. I think another option is we can give CalPERS a bunch of money ahead of time if we want. So let's say we've got a $4 million unaccrued liability there. We could choose to budget that $4 million and give it to CalPERS. But that doesn't guarantee that CalPERS won't come back in a couple of years and say, hey, our investments didn't do as well as we thought. Thanks for the money you gave us before, but we still need more. In which case they would still ask for more money. So it's not like we kind of get this early payment, make the payment, and we're locked in and we're done. It's still going to adjust as time goes on based on actual investment return. And then the third option, it's kind of a variation on the second option where I guess we buy bonds that effectively pay the CalPERS. That's the part I'm not tracking or maybe not understanding as well as I need to.
May I jump in?
Sure.
Yeah, hi, Rochelle. Yeah, hi everybody. This is Jeff Lamb with Brandis Tallman, and we worked with NHA Advisors to provide the presentation that you have in your packet regarding a financing for your UAL. It really, I believe the proper way to view this is not necessarily a full payoff. It's basically to access the capital marketplace the way you did with your installments, your bonds last year. You're accessing the capital marketplace to help with the restructuring of your UAL. And it doesn't have to be the full amount of your UAL that you would be paying off with, with lower interest rates with bonds. It could be any variation of amounts. I also have on the line with me, I do have Eric Scriven from NHA Advisors, who also can answer questions. But the one point I just wanted to make to maybe help with the conversation is that the options between doing some sort of UAL restructuring by using a revenue bond and using the 115 trust option, the SEPT program, they're not mutually exclusive. These are two strategies that can go together. I think Matt and I were on a panel together recently where we had that same agreement, where if you are, these are strategic options that can really go together well to meet that objective, I think, of what you guys have all been doing a great job of planning for, and that is to help mitigate your UAL. They're going to potentially be UALs in the future. These options, combined together, really could help with that mitigation, and it seems a smart strategy on your part. I just wanted to make that clear, and I would be happy to hand, maybe Eric Scriven has a couple comments, or maybe Matt does too.
Excuse me, this is Eric Scriven with NHA. I concur with that. Listening to this conversation with the board, evaluating all its options on fund strategies, it's clear to me that you're very conscious of rate management with your customers, also planning for capital. What you have right now is an unfunded actuarial liability that is ascending over the next 10 or so years, which is tough to budget around for many public agencies. So what we've seen with your agency is that you're putting cash on an annual basis into a 115 trust that's dedicated to these liabilities, and that's a very smart strategy. To the extent that the bond market right now is so very low, issuing revenue bonds in conjunction with your ongoing strategy of using the 115 trust, it could make sense for your agency, and that's what the presentation that we submitted, trying to clarify those options for you.
So what this would do is, if let's say we did this bond issuance, and let's say we decided to do $5 million and we got a 1.5% interest rate on the bonds. That would effectively give us a fixed rate on that bond payoff. And then we would take that $5 million and we would send it to PERS, I think, so that then our unfunded accrued liability is less. And then PERS would be charging us less each year in the future. And effectively what we're betting is that the interest rates in the bond market are going to be, it's like we're borrowing money at low interest rate to pay off higher interest rate debt. Is that the basic concept we're talking about here? And we're assuming that the bond market will give us better interest rates than PERS will in the end. Is that it in its simplest form?
Yes, this is Eric. You probably wouldn't be borrowing at 1.5%, but more like in the 3s. And there's certainly, just as long as CalPERS earns over time, the length of the term of the bond issue earns more than the bond rate over that period of time, then you have a differential. But we would also submit that a core strategic purpose for consideration is to restructure so that the CalPERS unfunded liability that you leave outstanding, because you're not going to pay it all off, plus when you combine it with the bond issue that you would issue, you try to structure that bond issue so that the payments combined with the outstanding CalPERS payments that you left on the table creates a more level and predictable payment shape, as we call it, overall payment shape. Right now, you have an ascending payment shape with CalPERS out through 2030, 2031, that, every year you were needing to budget more and more for that. And the goal would be to, yes, capture the very low rates right now in the marketplace, but also to restructure so that your combined overall payment with the bonds and to CalPERS is level and more budget friendly is how we call it. Was that clear, or?
Can I jump in if
I've
that's
got
okay with
Go
Rochelle?
ahead, Blake.
Okay. If I jumped in for a moment,
Who's
can
there?
everybody hear me?
I think Matt has a comment.
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, and thank you for your time. The first thing I want to do is I want to confirm and acknowledge Dan Wilkins. Yeah, Dan, I think you have the general idea. Okay, so I wanted to acknowledge that and confirm that. The second thing I'd like to do is acknowledge and confirm that I agree with everything about CalPERS that Jeff and Eric have said so far. And that would include what Dan said. So basically, if you look at it, all these dollars, whether you borrow dollars through a bond issuance or you just use dollars you already have, they eventually have to go to CalPERS, to the pension fund. CalPERS allows you to pay that debt and future ongoing costs. They call that normal cost, but we don't need to get fancy. They allow you to pay that annually over a 20-year amortization period on the debt, okay? Now, as Dan Wilkins mentioned, you can accelerate those debt payments. And if you do that, the idea is that you will pay less interest because you will delay the payment on the debt less. You will reduce the period of time you're paying the debt and you'll save money. So when Eric talks about restructuring the debt, he's actually talking specifically about that. What he's saying is you have different amortization bases of your debt. In effect, you have different credit cards at CalPERS that have balances on them that are not the same, that have terms, the length of payoff periods that are not the same. And the ones that are oftentimes most advantageous to pay off are the longest ones that are the largest amounts, because over the long term, you will save the most money by eliminating those. If you wanted to reduce near-term payment requirements to CalPERS, you would just do the inverse. You would pay off the largest amount of shortest term debt. But let's not get too complicated. I think that they've made a good point to you, and that's a separate conversation than the one that Jasper, my colleague who's with us, Jasper, say hi. Okay, he waved. Good night. Hi. There you go. So Jasper and I, what we would propose is that you would create a trust fund under Section 115 as a place to put additional monies to pay for future pension costs that are legally required. These can be just the annual costs that I described, or they can be those additional dollars that Dan alluded to that I have also confirmed. And what will happen is when you inevitably experience, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, future volatility with the CalPERS returns, because we invest in markets that are volatile at a level of risk exposure that is significant enough to be meaningful to your future, then you use that money from the 115 trust, as opposed to having to reach into your budget and rob from a number of different Peters to pay that Paul being CalPERS. So it allows for more consistent, stable budgetary conditions in the future, and in particular as it relates to CalPERS. And as Rochelle mentioned, we would earn a higher rate of return, probabilistically speaking, in our product than you would in Lafer County Treasury. Probably something as opposed to about 1%, or maybe if the getting is good, about 2%. You'll probably get between 4 and 5% with us at least. And I think what, Jeff and Eric might also confirm, but I don't want to put words into their mouth, and then I'll finish, is that if you were to borrow that $5 million that Dan Wilkins alluded to, you would probably give some of that directly to CalPERS pension as an additional discretionary debt payment. But what you'd also do is use some of that money to seed the 115 trust. And that way you're setting yourself up to reduce debt payment right away with some of the 5 million, let's say with at least half of that. But with the other half, you would be thinking about your future and mitigating volatility in the budgetary process from one cycle to the next, from 1 year to the next. So maybe they would confirm their kind of general agreement with that being the approach. And then I'll just open it up back to everybody for a great discussion, because you guys, this has been fun so far. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I'll let Eric tag on after my comments. But Matt's got it correct. I think there are two ways you can approach their program with how to fund it. You can fund it with your own dollars, or you can, because you have the ability to do an installment sale agreement, you have some flexibility to actually fund it, with financing. So that's really up for that's a much more detailed conversation and would take some additional analysis and direction from you and which way you want to go. But I am here to confirm that what Matt said is correct. He's really alluding to this idea of how do you want to feed that engine? How do you want to fund the 115 that they have set up? And there are multiple ways to do that. And we could certainly assist with the bond. And Eric, maybe you want to jump in as well.
Sure. I think that's a tremendous idea, Matt, in the sense that you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, paying down some of those bases that are really impacting the budget need every year for the next 10, 12 years. So you can get some real bang for your buck through the financing for those strategic base payoffs. But there will be volatility, and to squirrel away some money into that Section 115 to mitigate the volatility from year to year, even though you've really tried to take care of an overall repayment shape for your CalPERS unfunded liability repayment, there will be some volatility just because year to year CalPERS does have variation in their returns. So that Section 115 trust, the SEPT program, where if you've squirreled some money away in that can create some buffer, which, all the reserve funds that you're creating for capital buffering or and just overall rate management, that's a really good strategy that there'd probably be a myriad of options how you would fund that versus base payoff through a financing, which we'd all be glad to provide those options for the board's consideration.
Blake, you had a question?
Yeah, it's kind of a conceptual question that I'd be curious to hear back from well, it's not conceptual, just the way this thing works. We talk about that we're paying off debt with CalPERS, but in reality, we have an investment with CalPERS, that we have a shortfall in our investment amount. And if we say we paid off our entire outstanding shortfall, what that does is create more money that's then subject to volatility to CalPERS. So we're paying off these unfunded liability, but that's really putting more money into our investment account with them. So if the market performs poorly, that amount of new UAL is going to be even greater because we put more money into their kitty, as opposed to, diversifying and having money sitting in a 115 account. It doesn't pay off the debt, but it's not also subject to that. So I just wonder if that's a correct kind of concept there in terms of, one of the things that one should consider when you talk about, quote, paying off this debt. You're actually adding more into your investment, and therefore you're even more subject to the volatility with CalPERS.
So if I might, Blake,
Yeah.
I totally agree with what you've said. So the way I was speaking to it, frankly, is less than optimal when I use words like debt, because when you conceptualize debt as a credit card, once you pay off that, $3,000 balance, you're done unless you go spend again. And as Blake mentioned here, what he's really saying is that the purchase price of the house is not fixed, it's variable. The purchase price of the house continues to go up every single day that employees that are offered pensions come to work. But the relationship between the assets and, let me get my camera right, the assets, let's see, I'm backwards here, but here's the assets and the liabilities, which are always growing, that can also fluctuate based on volatility to the assets. So as Blake mentioned, yeah, this is just a never ending game. And what happens is as your balance in the pension system becomes larger, then a 10% loss is actually more money lost. Now, on the flip side of that coin, 10% earned is also more money earned, right? But if you look at our volatility over the past decade, volatility is different than it was over the past 30 years. Volatility is much more normal now. Say that one more time, please. I'm sorry.
Are we going to make a decision on this today as far as for where we're headed with this? Or are we going to refer this to a future meeting?
It was just for discussion today. We don't have a motion on it's not up for approval today, just for discussion.
Okay, so the motion that John made at the beginning is not relevant now?
There's no motion.
There's no motion on the floor. So is there any further discussion on this item?
I got a question.
Go ahead, Lane.
I'm not that interested in that pension obligation bond. I mean, that further debt down the road is not solving anything. We have the program for 5 years. I'm sort of like Blake. I mean, I'd like to look into this into the SEP trust more than the pension obligation bond. Because why deal with the markets on this issue long term? I think if we continue, no matter what, we continue as far as how we're going to pay this 5-year bond. This 5-year obligation. We're still, like you said, Blake, we're still going to have the increased amount. It's not going away, but it does eliminate. It's costing us 7% a year, and how we deal with it is where using the SEP as another tool to deal with it might be a way to go. But I'm not that positive about it, but I want to look into it.
If I may just add one comment for clarification, because I think everything that's been said has been accurate. Just to refocus one thing, the objective here is restructuring the UAL with financing. It's not to pay it all off. It's really to smooth out your payments, to cut off your peak, and that only enables you to manage future UALs better. So, there is definitely variation in what you'd be doing. It just so happens that we're in a historically low interest rate environment. A lot of agencies are very interested in looking at this because it does free up liquidity for them for other future capital needs. At the same time, it really helps the market cover and smooth out some of those increases that you will be seeing to your UAL. So just wanted to clarify that point.
Go ahead, LaRue.
Yeah, if I may, again, there's no action on this item. I think one of the biggest things that we're not taking into consideration discussing is the master plan and the capital improvements associated with that. I think that needs to be put into the discussion as well, as it will require capital. I think since this is a discussion point, we have various options. We can look at the SEP program. We can look at a pension program, or the combination of the two. I think I've got some good input here that there seems to be some interest for all options. How about we return after we get a master plan back with the capital improvements proposed, so we can take that into consideration and revisit SEPT options and bond options, where we can start putting numbers to figures, to projects, and then maybe have a revisit to the conversation there. Would that be acceptable to all board of directors?
That would be fine with me. I've got, I tend to try to oversimplify things sometimes, but we recently did a refinancing on some debt that we had, where we had an interest rate of 2.5% or 3%, whatever it was, through the state revolving fund. And we refinanced it and got an interest rate of closer to 1%. So that ended up being a sure bet, no-brainer restructuring of debt that's going to save us money in the long run, no questions asked. It seems like there's no surefire, yes, you're going to save money result that comes from this. It's how bullish do we feel about CalPERS and putting more money with them so that their investment returns are higher versus not. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a bit of a guessing game based on assumptions that people are making now as to what's going to happen with CalPERS and what's going to happen with other equity markets over the next 10 to 20 years. So anyway, I just say that because, at the end of the day, this gets beyond my, I guess, knowledge level to feel like it's like, yes, this is the right way to go. We're definitely going to save money in the long run if we go down this path. It could play out one way that we end up spending more, if one set of assumptions plays out, or we may end up spending less if another set of assumptions plays out. So what I'm interested in is any kind of probability that with one approach we've got a higher probability of saving money than with another approach, recognizing that there's no guarantees that we save money with any of it. And maybe I'm oversimplifying that in my mind, but that sounds like what the situation is.
One of the things, if I have just a moment, because I kind of sense that we're short on time, that I'd like to just say in response to Dan, is that, Dan, I can actually show you all, as it relates to using the SEPT 115 trust, how it will help you in a future year. And overwhelmingly, the mathematical probability of that exists. It's very high, right? Now, I'm also going to say right now, so everyone's clear, that doesn't mean that you won't continue to pay down debt aggressively directly into the CalPERS system through additional discretionary payments. We think that is very wise. It doesn't mean as well that you won't continue to use Lathan County Treasury for very, very short-term holding place for your assets that will then go into the pension system, because that too is very, very wise. So I think what Jasper and I need to do is put together some information, send it to Rochelle, and then get it to you so you can see that offline when you have more time, and then we can reconvene in the future to discuss how that would help you as just adding that tool to your toolbox. So you'd have CalPERS, you'd have Lathan County Treasury, and then you'd also have a 115 trust. Whether you want to do a bond or not would be between y'all and Jeff and Eric. What I can say is I've also seen the probabilities associated with what Jeff and Eric are talking about, and also supported mathematically. Those could be effective tools. I think LaRue had a good point about generating capital for projects that is outside the realm of pension directly, but also would work with some of those dollars too. So it's a pleasure to have been with you all. I'm going to go back on mute unless someone has a question for me. I appreciate your time.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Blake.
LaRue, what is the time frame? I know we budgeted $2.6 million to put against our pension liability. If we don't spend, and we've invested 1.3 straight into the CalPERS, and we have another 1.3 available, and if we don't do anything, it sits in LAIF earning 1%, which is not a good long-term strategy. But so I'm wondering just what the timeline you have, if you think that we need to wait for the results of the master plan, because that could influence our kind of spending patterns. What is the time frame for that?
I'm anticipating the master plan within 3 months to have that concluded. If you can acknowledge, Jay, do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's correct. We're in a spot right now where we need a few more months to sort out some of the ripples on what their estimates are.
And you're thinking that the results of that could, I mean, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little too quickly, but that the potential expenditures that we may see as part of the capital master plan may make us rethink these large additional payments we've been talking about making against our pension liability.
That would be correct, Blake, yes.
Okay, well then I absolutely, yeah, I think that we should wait for that if that's the case and you have cash flow concerns that you see, that I think that's wise to hold off on making these payments that really get locked in, whether it's to CalPERS, to SEPT, or a pension obligation bond. We're locking those funds up in one way or another that wouldn't be available for capital projects.
Yeah, I see Lane raising your hand, but
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you, Blake, as far as waiting until we get the capital improvement plan there also. But I would also want to continue on the same pay down right now that we're doing on our 5-year pay down and see what's going to be capital needs wise and everything. And maybe then we need to adjust it. But at this point, let's keep going forward with our pay down and then revisit it in 3 months here when we get the plan.
Yeah, so we did, Lane, do the half pay down, part of the 5-year schedule. I don't think postponing the remaining half, because that's what this discussion is based on, another few months is going to impact the whole financial picture. So I asked that we, like I said, return when the master plan is done. We'll have some better figures together, look at options to address all 3 of these, provide projections on successes for each of them. And then we'll have the security that we're not overextending ourselves for projects. So, I'm sorry, John?
I would think, just my opinion, we're always going to be a little underwater on the UAL, but as long as we're not too deep underwater, with these low interest rates, we just probably have to keep it as tight up there as we can, but not get over it. Because I think all UALs are underfunded at this point in time, probably nationwide.
I think that would be an accurate statement.
Mm-hmm. And this is Eric. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be at 100% just because you don't get credit from CalPERS if you're overfunded. So the 92-93% area is a good area that there's a lot of statistical information that you can show that the likelihood of success based on the low interest rates right now versus over time, what CalPERS will earn over the length of whatever financing or plan of attack you undertake, you would be have a likelihood of success.
Okay, I think that we've kicked this around quite well. Thank you, everybody, for helping us out in participating in this teleconference. I think it's time to move on. With that being said, let's move on to item 15 in the agenda.
Oh, I had seen your hand.
What was that?
I had the room.
Yeah, if I realize we'd like to conclude this discussion topic, but I'd like to get confirmation from the board of directors that the direction is that I will return at a future date after completion of the master plan and revisit these options. Is that the consensus?
And we're talking about a 3-month time frame.
That is the expected timeframe, sir, yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much. I see acknowledgements from everybody here. Thank you.
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay, moving along to item 15, approval of the digital scanning. What's up, Jay?
Good morning, directors. Yeah, so we received, as you know, we advertised for bidding for the digital scanning project for this fall, and we received one bid. And it's not the, usually we get one bid, but it's from another bidder. So we were pleasantly surprised to see the price on this bidder was lower. We did ask for some technical details in the review of the bid to ensure that their equipment was going to conform with the specs. There's a video resolution part of the spec that would need to be waived as a minor irregularity if we were to accept this bid. But keep in mind that all the other projects that we've done digital scanning up till this date have used the equipment that this bidder is proposing to use. So this year we had stepped up the resolution a little bit just because 4K technology is available. However, it's that additional resolution is not necessary for the work for us to see what's going on. Given all of that, and given the price and given the minor irregularity, the recommendation for the board is to waive that video resolution requirement as an irregularity and award the bid to Pipe and Plant Solutions. Are there any questions?
Jay, I'll make the motion for approval, but I have a question with regard, that 18-inch pipe, that's on the plant property, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that one little, it's like 5 feet long or something. Yeah, it's on the plant property.
Okay.
Yep.
No further comment. I'll move approval and waive those conditions.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion from Lewis, seconded from Northrop. And no further discussion? Anyone? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Don Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes. Next item is approval of task order amendment number 32.2 with CH2M Hill for the 2020 Headworks Improvement Project.
Yeah, so what you have before you today is a task order amendment to the original task order 32. This is 32.2. We've already done one amendment. And this amendment does several things. One is that our designer had an overrun on the design due to the complications, the increasing complications that the project presented itself during the design process. The consultant has agreed to split half of those costs, acknowledging that some of those overruns were their own doing. It also is an amendment for increase in their services during construction, during the construction phase due to the extra complications of the job. It's a more complex job. It's going to have more submittals, going to have more inspection requirements, et cetera. And then finally, it adds construction management, which was that, once now that we're at this phase, we're ready to bid, we'd like to get a construction manager on board to inspect the work. So that's what this amendment does. Are there any questions?
Questions? Go ahead, Lane.
I'll make the motion for approval of the change orders.
I'll second.
Okay, motion on the floor. Question, Blake?
Hey, Jay, it looks like the engineer's estimate or the estimate of the construction cost of the project is $2 million. How much did that change from the original project as conceived?
So we started at about 2.4 million, but that included if you recall, there was some discussion about complicated bypass systems that we were able to engineer out of the job. So there was a net savings because bypass, the complete bypass was going to be quite expensive. And under this under this redesign, the bypass needs are far less. So that brought that number down.
So again, the capital costs have gone down. The construction cost, projected construction costs have gone down by making it a little bit more complicated, less bypassing, but better configurations. And it's generated some additional costs in design and potentially CM, construction management work. But the combination of all of the above is perhaps still below the original project estimate of construction plus, call it engineering.
That's correct. And what we had discussed on the last amendment still holds true. And that is what we wanted to do is, instead of basically spending all this money on bypass pumping that is a temporary thing and it's money that kind of leaves the agency, is that under the improved design, we shifted those monies to improvements that operations wanted and that would benefit the plant. So there was a shift in monies, through in the design, but overall, you're correct. The overall dollar figure, we're on target for total project cost.
Thanks, Jay.
You're welcome. Any other questions? The recommendation is to award this or to approve this amendment.
Lane, is that your motion?
Or he already had a motion.
That is approved. That is my motion.
Okay, we have it seconded by Lowell Northrop, or John Northrop.
Yes.
Johnny?
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Okay, no further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving along to the approval of change order number 1 for the organizational assessment. Any discussion?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Back in 2019, the board of directors approved the organizational assessment and awarded it to Kroll Engineers in the amount of $56,000. I have asked them to expand their scope a little bit to include additional validation meetings with our management team, to include some presentations to the board of directors, perform a laboratory workload analysis, and develop some alternatives for implementation to assist with the board of directors of their organizational assessment. In response, they have submitted a scope change order for the scope change and fee change to include a $12,000 fee change. So the recommendation I have is that we approve change order number 1, which amends the scope and charges an additional $12,000 for the organizational assessment. With that, I can take on any questions. I do see you with your hand up, Lane.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Lane.
Yeah, with that, are we gonna, we talked about an employee survey. Are we gonna get that through Carrillo?
Carrillo has performed an employee survey. That is part of the foundation of their organizational assessment. They use the data collected from the survey to make recommendations. So that has been completed, yes.
Okay, so that's already included in the amount. This is just an additional amount to finish the work.
That is correct, Lane.
I'm fine. I'll make the recommendation that we approve the change order for the organizational assessment.
Any follow-up discussion?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion on the floor. We need a second.
I have a question, just if I can at this point. I know at either the last meeting or the meeting before, we assigned a ad hoc committee of Wilkins and Cox to participate in reviewing the organizational assessment. I'm just wondering if a meeting of that ad hoc committee has happened and whether they have a recommendation on the change order, or whether.
Good question. Bring that up. We did have an assigned ad hoc committee. We have not met yet. The only meeting we have had is to bring in our managers so they can see a preliminary draft of it. So as to the recommendation, I will defer that to Dan and Dale.
Okay, Dan, did you hear that?
Yeah, like LaRue said, Dale and I haven't met with staff or the consultant on this yet, so I don't have any more insight on this than any of the other board members do.
Okay, any other questions or comments from any of the board members? Any questions or comments from the staff? We need a second on Lane Lewis's motion.
I'll second the motion. This is an important study, and if staff feels there needs to be some additional work done on it to get it done right, I think it's a worthwhile expenditure.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the $12,000 addition to the Carrillo report. No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Next item, department reports. Operations, what's up?
Mr. P.
Morning, President Cox, Board of Directors. The Operations Department report for June. All waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Overall, the plant performed well through the month. Digester 31 painting project was complete, and we're prepping it to put it back in service. We've been working in conjunction with engineering, taking systems in and out of service for the last couple of months for a multitude of different projects that are ongoing for the summer to try to help completion there. Laboratory report, the laboratory director has resigned and the agency is taking steps to address the absence. Staff performed necessary laboratory testing per WDR requirements and operational needs. You can see here that the flows and the average flows for the month and the numbers. One thing I did want to point out is that we have added another graph to the operational graphs. It's the third one in. It's actually a daily average flow for all the districts. And previously we were providing just the monthly daily average flow, and we added this in so everybody can see the actual daily flow averages. Do you have any questions on, anybody have any questions on the report?
Hey, Mike, this is Blake. Thanks for adding that in there. Kind of, you can see the fluctuations on weekends and stuff like that. I'm curious, are these measured at the various agency locations, or is this an attenuated somehow? And it's surprising to see the peaks that are in TSD's flow for weekends with virtually no indication of any kind of weekend peak flows coming out of any of the other 4 member agencies, whereas I would think they would see some level of observable weekend and flows.
These are based off of our telemetry systems, the daily average flows. So this is the actual flow that we are seeing from each one of those districts.
Okay, I do find it curious that, Tahoe City and North Tahoe, which I think of as, and I know that we're in an odd time of the world with the COVID, but Truckee is still seeing, as you can tell, weekend visitorship, and I would have thought you'd see that to some degree more pronounced in Squaw or Tahoe City or North Tahoe. So it's interesting to see these patterns. So thanks.
Blake,
Very well.
Blake, I'd like to say that, our second homeowner use over here is going off the wall. Usually our second homeowners average 6 weeks a year, and they're way up. That's probably why you're not seeing the spike.
Okay,
Any
any
other questions?
questions or comments for Mike? Let's
Thank you.
move to maintenance. What's up, Richard?
Morning, President Cox and members of the board. For mechanical side of maintenance, June was again another busy month supporting the ongoing projects, the painting project with us doing piping work inside digester 31. On the E&I side, we completed some critical preventative maintenance work on our 12 kV power supply coming into the facility, as well as having to replace a few VFDs that had gone out due to age. On the TRI, we completed our spring walk with no major issues found, only minor items of brush removal that's needed for access and a couple manholes that we need to do a little patchwork on. The other item I wanted to highlight is the corridor lighting project. That's one where we're going through the facility and removing the old T-bar that's in the corridors and upgrading all the lighting to LED. So that's an ongoing project that we're doing in-house that'll help with power savings and provide better lighting along the corridors. Those are really the highlights of the month. Any questions?
Any questions for Richard? Seeing none and hearing none, let's move on. Thank you. Let's talk about the engineering report.
Yeah, good morning, directors. Again, the engineering report lists all the projects that the engineering group has been working on the month of June. As you can see, we keep on piling them on. We're quite busy. We've added a couple more in July that I'll be reporting about next month. Are there any questions on any of the projects that I list?
Question on the project.
Yep.
Jay, let's talk about the roof project going on out here in front. I can't express to you how disappointed I am in seeing how tore up the front of this agency is in regards to the maintenance and the re-roofing project that's taken place here at the agency. And I just cannot believe that the contractor would engage in what I could see as negligence in the grounds and the landscaping that's been totally destroyed in front of the agency. And I'd like to recommend, Jay, that before the final payment is made on this roofing contract, that we make sure that the landscaping is brought back to the way it was before this project took place. And I don't mean seeding and grading, I mean grading and sodding back to its original state. What's happened out there is absolutely disgusting and inexcusable.
Okay, if I can address that, we had looked at different approaches, different angles on where the contractor can bring material up onto the building in light of where the areas that they're working. And unfortunately, that was the only area that presented a good option was across the front lawn. What you'll notice when you leave today, Dale, is that they've already completed the work on the one side where there's I'd say minimal disturbance to the soil. They've been doing those same activities on the other side of the lawn, and that side of the lawn historically has always been spongy and holds water and is wet. We're thinking that we probably have either a clay layer under there or something was different about that, how that that soil was initially installed, one side versus the other. That being said, we know that very well about the ruts that have occurred on that side due to what we think is a subsurface soil issue. And I know that Richard has some plans on reconstructing / reseeding, resodding different areas in throughout, and that this was going to be this area was obviously going to be part of that. Richard, do you have anything to add on that plan?
I just add in that we completely understand the comment on the appearance, but it was a joint effort, knowing that I was going to be working with our landscape contractor to come in and begin work on the front area as soon as the roofer was out of the area. So, we entered into it kind of knowing that we'd have some work to redo from the weight of the high lift coming in, and then just as Jay mentioned, the historical issue of this side of the lawn holding water and being extremely spongy. But we are engaged with the landscape contractor. They're just waiting for clearance to be able to come in and start assessing the irrigation system and developing a plan to get the lawn back into pristine condition with some additional landscape work done around the front of the building.
That's good news. That's good news because, I don't know how the rest of the directors feel about curb appeal, but I feel that this agency is probably one of the more recognized agencies in the state as far as for how we do our processing and how we manage our effluent. And we have tours coming through here quite frequently. And curb appeal, when you have an agency that represents the greater region of the Lake Tahoe area, curb appeal is of utmost importance, and it sends a message to whoever comes and visits this agency that we take pride and ownership in our grounds as much as we do our processing. And I just hope that this doesn't fall through the cracks, Richard and Jay, because I'll tell you what, I'm gonna stay on this because I feel it's very important.
Yeah, Richard, if you need some help on I got 63 acres of turf here. So if you need some help, call me. I'll send over my superintendent or myself. But I definitely do some core soil samples before you do anything else. Figure out what's going on there and then proceed from there.
Sounds good. I'll take you up on it.
Was it part of the contract to reestablish the grounds after?
Well, there's part of the provision that they shall restore, conditions. But what is always in every part of a contract is what's called unforeseen conditions. And I think it's, for one side of the lawn to be to have withstood the traffic, and the other one completely not withstanding the traffic. I don't think a reasonable contractor could have foreseen that.
Hey, Jay, changing the subject from the lawn, you included 4 photos on page 359. Usually I can track maybe what you're trying to show, but I couldn't quite follow these real well. Could you just give a really brief description of what you're showing us in those 4 photos?
Sure. So the photo in the upper left is they are taking the roof down to the concrete decking, of the roof. So that the way that the roof is built, it's got a pan deck, and then they've originally put concrete in that pan deck. So you can see that on the where the skylight is, that's EPDM that they've installed, and they're working the direction of the shovel. The upper right-hand corner is the digester building re-roof, and they're scraping off all that mastic and getting down to, again, the base layer of the roof so that they could build it up. So these are kind of works in progress on those two top photos. And then the bottom photos are of digester 31, and on the inside of the digester, the lower left photo is of the pipes, the mixing pipes, after they've been painted. And then the lower right-hand corner is the digester lid. Once it's been painted, it was painted off to the side, and then it was remounted in position, and this was following its remounting in position. Does that clarify it enough?
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
You're welcome. Any other questions on projects?
Okay, let's move on. What's up, Bob?
Bob, you're muted.
You think I'd learn after, 50,000 times here. Good morning, members of the board. The IT department has been maintaining a regular schedule remotely. We're still coming into the plant when necessary. We have ramped up our purchases of remote working equipment, mostly laptops for telecommuting, so we can respond to the vagrancies of COVID and things like that. We've transferred all of our cloud services from the now defunct Elastic hosts onto our local premises servers, and that was done with a minimal amount of downtime. We're continuing on the electronic logbook migration to the plant information system, and we're looking at a beta release probably around the end of the month. And then here at the plant, we've also been assisting in integrating the VFDs into SCADA that INE has installed in the past month. Vicki has posted the new IT specialist position, and that'll be closing on the 24th of July. Any questions?
No questions for Bob?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What's up, Rochelle?
Good morning, Board of Directors and President Cox. So last month, immediately following the approval of audit, we received emails from DeMoore, Hamrick, and Schneider to begin pre-audit preparation, and submitted information immediately. So our accounting department has already started submitting samples to the accountant for pre-audit. That was scheduled to begin the last week of July, but they've already started, so hopefully we'll get that finished quickly this year. They are going to be doing that remotely, so they will not be on site to help the social distancing. Billing and customer service. So Celeste has been working on, or worked with me to actually I worked with her, helping her finalize all the tax roll billing and delinquency billing. She did a great job stepping up to get that done, and that was all completed, and she finalized all the Cassell set up in the system for the tax roll certification. And so the new tax roll billing with the new software, everything went smoothly. So it was great to see that done. And all of pretty much everything that kept me and myself and staff busy for the month, you've seen in the packet. So staff has stayed busy, and also with the fund policy and setting up Cassell itself to change from Fund 0 and 01 and transitioning Cassell to be able to work now into Fund 10. That transition was also prepared for, so effective today,
with this approval, we will now be able to operate with the general fund. So that's all I have to report unless you have any questions.
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, not so much a question, but just a comment and a, reflection. Rochelle, I appreciate all the data. You also provide the charts. And I was just looking at the most recent connection fees. And if the board remembers, we adopted that base plus square footage value for connection fees that used to be 5,000 per. And I believe the previous month, we were almost sitting exactly right at that, meaning the average new connection averaged that 2,000 square feet that we had kind of estimated around, but we had 157 new connections in 1 month alone, and their average charge was 3,200 per EDU. And so obviously those are some large multifamily, smaller sized units, which brought the overall average for the year to date down to just a little over 4,000 per EDU. But it's just kind of interesting. I like tracking that and seeing how good of a job we did in coming up with that base plus scale value and how that ends up impacting our overall connection fee revenue. So just a comment on the data from the report. Thanks, Rochelle.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Rochelle and the administration? Seeing none and hearing none. What's up, LaRue? How's Florida?
Florida's doing good, doing real good. It's a little hot and humid.
Is my air conditioning on?
It is on. So to add on to the general manager report, I just wanted to provide some information regarding change order number 2, the 2020 training project. That was a change order in the amount of $609, and it pertained to the additional lump sum fee to include pre-blood level draws for the contractor staff and air monitoring for lead paint discovered in digester structure number 31. I'd forgotten to include in the packet. It is a smaller amount. I will go ahead and distribute this to the board of directors independently for reference after the meeting today. Nothing major to add in addition to what's listed here. I just did want to acknowledge everybody's good their efforts and work on the core values. It was a very complicated process. We had numerous meetings. The COVID, we had to go ahead and start with having the personal meetings in a conference room, and then it migrated into meetings through GoToMeeting. So it was quite difficult. But good job to everybody for that. I think this is a good positive step for the agency moving forward. It gives the roadmap for all staff for their expectations and to let them know and let them be able to control their future at the agency and make themselves successful. So other than that, I have nothing else to add to the manager's report. If there's any questions, I can take them now. Okay.
No questions or comments? Move on to director's comments. Wayne, any comments?
I want to commend the staff. That core value was process was, I think, very much needed and well done. And I can't wait till we see this survey coming back and seeing how we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, Director Northrup.
I agree with Lane.
Director Wilkins.
No comments.
Director Blake.
No comments at this time. Thanks.
And no comments from myself. That concludes our agenda. We're going to move to closed session. Nothing else to be brought before this July the 15th, the year 2020. We're going to move to closed session.
Just one item. I just wanted to make sure I clarified the joke between Dan in regards to the air conditioning unit. I'm not staying at his property. But thank you.
That's funny.
Do we need to?
It's always muggy in Florida.
It is.
Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I second.
By Northrup, seconded by Lewis. Nothing else? Roll call, please.
Dan Wilkin,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Lane Lewis,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
and President Cox.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn is approved. And does everyone have the, let me stop the recording now.